there's this softness that comes with somatic work, and it begins to reveal how rigid and how stiff you really are when you begin to honor the space that you're currently in with no judgment, and being able to feel through everything through flow and grace, right? And I'm even noticing that I'm becoming a little bit more sensitive and a little bit more softer in my life and with myself. I think oftentimes we try to do this space with judgment, when you look at yourself in the mirror, and we don't know how to disassociate the program from who we still are, but to know when to shut off that aspect of you that you needed in order to get to this present moment. And a lot of times that doesn't come through watching inspirational videos. It doesn't come from going to a bunch of seminars. It doesn't come through retreats. The most powerful thing that you can do for yourself is really just sit with yourself and to disassociate and disconnect, from the external aspect of everything that we're constantly doing, and getting more into this space of being. And being, meaning with somatic as well, is being internal, being with yourself, being in the solitude, being within the shadows. I feel oftentimes when we speak about, the light and love, and, that's a beautiful thing, but then there's also the shadows and the darkness, and those are the elements that we've all experienced in life, where we have to go through those things that are going to chisel away from the falsehood of identities and programs in order to spring forth and to spring newness again, right? And I don't think we give that aspect of ourselves much credit. We complain about it as we go through it, but then I don't think that there's this conscientious thought pattern of, wait a minute, this is where I need to be, this is where I'm supposed to be, this is required because of what I'm asking of myself. And when you're asking of things of yourself and you're not living in a delusion or an illusion, things are going to begin to uproot in order for you to be able to face them and see them for all that they are. Not just who you are, but all that you are and all that it is. And so somatic work is really about flow. It's about honoring the internal self. It's also about being present. It's about feeling through with motions and emotions, energy in motion. And once you begin to do that, there are all of these crystalline blockages that have been attached to the fascia and have been attached to, even the muscular system and the skeletal system, and it just doesn't move with grace. The fluid that it needs in order for us to be able to bend and to be, flexible doesn't move when we have crystalline emotions and trauma and feelings that have, hardened our bodies, which in return harden our responses and harden, our relationship, one with self always and foremost, but then also harden our relationships with others. We never really take the time to sit back and realize that our reactions towards things is because of the non-actions that we're taking with ourselves, because now we're feeding that non-action that we aren't giving ourselves into others, because we don't know how to regulate it. We don't know how to be observers of a reaction before it begins to spring up and then be, given onto others. And I think that's a powerful space for us to be in, is when you do begin to recognize when things are surfacing and to disassociate and disconnect, and then observe and then ask yourself, is this really the space? Is my reaction really going to allow me to, move forward in the space that I want to be in if I react in a certain way? Does this actually even need a reaction from me, right? Is a reaction even required, or is this just a moment that I'm supposed to observe the aspect of my body that is calling out, that needs my attention and that needs my awareness and that, you know, needs my love. And so, you know, you do become softer, you become gentler, you begin to see things with greater vision, because as you begin to move within your body and as you begin to work with yourself in a very somatic and honorable way and a sovereign way, then that's when layers just begin to disintegrate, because you're no longer holding on to the density of what is keeping you bound into your current self, right? So, you know, I know I'm in a space of myself, and those that have been with me on my journey from whenever you started to in this present moment, you've seen how I have transitioned from body to body, even with my full weight loss, to identity through my personal reality that is creating my personal reality, you know, my personality creating my personal reality. And so things have to shift. Things have to move. You have to allow yourself to be that Fibonacci, you know, that is circulating through life, that has its own circadian rhythm of life, you know, that's constantly spiraling up, and oftentimes it's going to be spiraling down. Nothing is ever linear. You know, our walking is always linear. You know, we're always moving forward with walking, and just sitting down, which is another thing that, you know, hardens the body, because now we're not using certain aspects of our fascia, our muscular system, our skeletal system, because we're not moving things, you know, in a way that's fluid. Everything that we do is in a very programmed state. And so I think we tend to forget that, you know, as much as we have to give onto, you know, the system that we're currently in this 3D reality that we've actually chosen for ourselves in the states that, you know, we are, you also have to take that same initiative and that same accountability and, you know, that same energy and that same drive to be able to also move yourself in a different form and a different fashion, so that your body doesn't, it's not that it forgets, it just, you know, freezes, it stays on hold. And, you know, that's when you realize, you know, you're holding on to things where stress, anxiety, and all of this, because the energy isn't flowing in a, you know, a beautiful rhythm. You know, it's kind of like this very you know, you know what I'm saying? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, you know, you always want your life to be able to just flow and move with grace. And if you yourself internally haven't acknowledged that, then externally you're witnessing exactly where you are in the physicality of yourself, in the mental state of yourself, in the energetical electromagnetic field of yourself. Because of course we already know, as above so below, as within so without, you know, and there is nothing in this life that is currently in your cipher that is not reflecting all that you are. So it's never been about the other person. It's never been about the other experience. It's never been about what you're currently at or where you're currently at within yourself, you know, through the external aspect of what you're experiencing. Everything is always, you are the center of your cipher, and everything else is a mirror. It's a relic. It's a memory of where you're currently at, you know, and it holds memory, and it reveals onto you where your, you know, frequency currently is. And if you're tired of that shit, then, you know, you got to start moving some energy around. You know what I'm saying? You got to start taking some accountability, you know? So yeah, I just had a few minutes and just kind of wanted to give you guys some jewels this morning. And the journey of oneself is a beautiful dynamic, and, you know, I don't think there's anything more precious than to be able to acknowledge, you know, the fluidity of, you know, one's being and where it takes you as you begin to move and climb that ladder of yourself, right? So, all right, peace. This is the fit for today. Y'all see how skinny your girl is? Look at that. And then I got my cute shoes. It's casual day, but baby, there's nothing ever anything casual about me. I'm not casual with my life. I'm not casual with myself. I'm not casual on casual day, you know. Yes, be fancy with it all. All right, peace.